I never thought I'd spend Christmas alone at 62. Not after dedicating 35 years of my life to raising my son Thomas, putting him through college, and helping him buy his first home. But there I was, staring at a text message that read, "Mom, we think it's best if you skip Christmas this year. Vanessa's organizing something special for her parents, and she's stressed about having too many people. Maybe we can do lunch in January instead?" Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What Thomas didn't know then was that I had just received life-changing news. Dr. Eleanor Blackwell, the cardiologist I'd worked with for 20 years, had left me more than just memories in her will. The house my son and his family lived in, the one I had helped them buy, was about to teach them all a lesson in gratitude. I still remember the day Thomas was born. The moment they placed him in my arms, I promised him the world. As a single mother working as a nurse, I didn't have much, but whatever I had, I gave to him. My shifts at Ashford Bay Medical Center were long and exhausting, but they put food on our table and eventually helped Thomas attend the university of his dreams. "Mom, you don't have to work overtime again," Thomas would say when he was a teenager, noticing the dark circles under my eyes. "It's just temporary," I'd reply with a smile, though we both knew it wasn't. Working 60 hours a week had become my normal for years. When he met Vanessa during his final year of college, I was thrilled. She was beautiful, ambitious, and came from the kind of family I'd always wanted for him: educated, well-connected, with the kind of stability I could never provide on my own. Patricia and Howard Grant, her parents, were the epitome of Ashford Bay success. She an administrator at the very university Thomas attended, he a retired attorney whose family name adorned one of the town's oldest law firms. The first time I met them at their waterfront home, I felt the gulf between our worlds. While I made small talk about hospital shifts and community events, they discussed European vacations and the latest gallery opening in the city. "Nancy works with Dr. Eleanor Blackwell," Thomas mentioned proudly, trying to bridge our worlds. "One of the top cardiologists on the coast." Patricia nodded politely. "Fascinating. Are you in administration there as well?" "I'm a nurse," I replied simply. "Oh," she said, her smile tightening slightly. "How dedicated." I didn't miss the way Howard glanced at Vanessa, a silent message passing between them. But I told myself it didn't matter. Thomas was happy, and that's all I cared about. When they announced their engagement 6 months later, I threw myself into helping however I could. The Grants planned an extravagant wedding at the Ashford Bay Yacht Club, with costs that made my stomach turn. Thomas approached me one night, clearly uncomfortable. "Mom, about the wedding. Vanessa's parents are covering most of it, but there are some traditions." I knew what was coming. "The rehearsal dinner," I said. "Don't worry, I've been saving." What I didn't tell him was that those savings were meant for my retirement. At 55, I should have been securing my future, but instead, I spent $15,000 on a dinner at an upscale restaurant to impress people who barely acknowledged me. After the wedding, Thomas and Vanessa moved into a small apartment while they saved for a house, or at least that was the plan. 3 months later, Thomas called me, excitement bubbling in his voice. "Mom, we found it!" The perfect house in Heritage Hill. It's a craftsman with original woodwork, walking distance to the best schools for when we have kids. But what, sweetheart? The down payment. We're about $50,000 short, and with Vanessa starting her interior design business. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what he was asking. That money represented my entire life savings outside of my modest 401k. But I could still hear the little boy who once asked why we couldn't have a house with a yard like his. "Friends. I'll transfer it tomorrow," I said. Thomas's voice cracked with emotion. "Mom, I promise we'll pay you back every cent." "I know you will. I replied, though we both knew that was unlikely. The day they moved in, I brought homemade curtains I'd sewn for their living room and kitchen. Vanessa thanked me politely, but later I overheard her telling Thomas they didn't fit her vision for the space. The curtains disappeared, as did many of my other contributions to their home over the years. What didn't disappear was my support. When Sophie was born, I took unpaid leave to help for 3 weeks while Vanessa recovered. When Jacob arrived 2 years later, I did the same. I picked the children up from school 3 days a week so Vanessa could focus on growing her business. I cooked meals, cleaned their house, and loved those children fiercely. Through it all, I maintained my position as Dr. Blackwell's primary nurse. Eleanor was more than just my employer. She became a friend, the sister I never had. A brilliant, unmarried woman who dedicated her life to saving others, she understood the sacrifices I made for Thomas. "Nancy," she said to me once, "you do realize you're enabling them, don't you?" I sighed, folding sterile dressings with practiced efficiency. "They're building their life, Eleanor. Thomas works hard." "And Vanessa? Does she work hard too? Or does she just work hard at spending the money you and Thomas provide?" I didn't answer, but Eleanor knew. She always knew. As the years passed, I noticed subtle changes in how Thomas and Vanessa treated me. The grateful, "Thank you for watching the kids," became expected. The invitation to Sunday dinner became a text message asking if I could drop off a casserole because they were too busy. The children still ran to me with open arms, but Vanessa increasingly supervised our interactions, correcting my outdated childcare approaches with thinly veiled condescension. "Nancy, we don't do timeouts anymore. They're psychologically damaging," she informed me after I had Sophie sit quietly for 5 minutes after she hit her brother. "Of course," I would reply, swallowing my thoughts about how Thomas turned out just fine with the occasional timeout. Patricia Grant became a frequent presence, offering parenting advice that Vanessa followed religiously. I was the grandmother, who picked up the slack, but Patricia was the grandmother whose opinions shaped how my grandchildren were raised. Last Christmas had been particularly difficult. I'd spent weeks knitting sweaters for the children and finding the perfect books for their growing interests. Sophie had just started showing artistic talent, something that resonated deeply with me. My own painting had been set aside decades ago when motherhood and work consumed my time. But I recognized the spark in her and bought her a proper set of watercolors. When the children opened my gifts, their excitement was genuine. But later, I overheard Vanessa speaking to her mother in the kitchen. "More handmade things," she sighed, "and art supplies that will make a mess everywhere." "Well," Patricia replied, "it's the thought that counts, though a contribution to their college funds would be more practical." That night, I drove home, to my small apartment, fighting back tears. The apartment I'd moved to after selling my modest house to help Thomas with that down payment. The apartment where I displayed my nursing awards and the few paintings I managed to create in stolen moments. The apartment that would never host Christmas because it was too small, too simple, too me. 2 months later, Eleanor Blackwell collapsed in her office. A massive stroke, ironic for a cardiologist who had saved countless patients from similar fates. I sat by her hospital bed for 3 days, holding her hand and reading her favorite poetry. Thomas visited once briefly. Vanessa sent flowers with a card signed by the whole family. When Eleanor died, I felt as though a piece of me had died too. We'd worked together for 20 years. She'd seen me through Thomas's childhood illnesses, his graduation, his wedding. She'd listened to my worries, celebrated my small victories, and never once made me feel less than her equal despite the difference in our positions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The day of her funeral, I sat in the front row, unexpected for a nurse but requested specifically in Eleanor's final arrangements. Thomas and Vanessa attended but left immediately after the service, citing a school function for Sophie. I stayed, accepting condolences from doctors, patients, and staff who all seemed to know how close Eleanor and I had been. "She thought the world of you," her attorney Martin Goldstein told me as the crowd thinned. "She'd like to speak with you tomorrow at my office, if you're available." I frowned, confused. How could she? Martin smiled gently. "She left a video, Nancy, and some other matters to discuss." The next morning I sat in Martin's office, still numb with grief. He placed a tablet in front of me and pressed play. Eleanor's face appeared, thinner than I remembered from even a few months ago. Had she been ill longer than any of us realized? "Nancy," she began, her crisp voice filling the room. "If you're watching this, then I've finally lost an argument with cardiovascular disease." She smiled wryly. "I've never been good at sentiment, so I'll be direct. You have been the most loyal colleague, the most dedicated nurse, and the truest friend I've ever known. You've spent your life giving to others, your son, your patients, even me. You sacrificed your own dreams, your financial security, and often your happiness to ensure Thomas had every opportunity." I wiped tears from my cheeks as she continued. "I've watched you empty your accounts to support his lifestyle while you work extra shifts at 60. I've seen you cancel your painting classes to babysit his children while his wife attends wine tastings. I've observed their gradual transformation from gratitude to entitlement." She leaned closer to the camera, her eyes intense. "Nancy, it's time someone gave to you for a change. I have no family, as you know. My parents are gone. I never married, never had children. What I have is resources, and I've made the decision to leave the bulk of my estate to you." I gasped, covering my mouth with my hand. "The details are with Martin, but in summary, my investment portfolio, my beach house in Seacliff, and a trust fund that will provide you with approximately $70,000 annually for the rest of your life. Enough for you to retire immediately, pursue your art, travel, whatever you choose. It's time, Nancy. Time to live for yourself." Martin paused the video as I struggled to process what I'd heard. "There's more," he said gently. "But perhaps you need a moment?" I shook my head, still in shock. "Please, continue." Eleanor's face reappeared. "There's one more thing, Nancy. I know about the house. How you gave Thomas and Vanessa your life savings for the down payment. How they've never repaid you or even acknowledged the magnitude of that gift. I've taken the liberty of having Martin investigate the property's status." She smiled, a glint of mischief in her eye. "It seems they never properly documented your contribution. Legally, with the amount you provided, you own 30% of that house. I've instructed Martin to ensure that this ownership is properly recorded, not to cause problems, but to ensure that your investment is protected. They can continue living there, of course, but your stake in the property should be recognized." The video ended, and Martin handed me a folder containing documents that confirmed everything Eleanor had said. I was now wealthy by any reasonable standard, with a beach house, investments, and a monthly income that exceeded what I earned working full-time. And I owned nearly a third of Thomas and Vanessa's beloved Craftsman home. "What do I do now?" I whispered, more to myself than to Martin. He regarded me thoughtfully. "That's entirely up to you, Nancy. Dr. Blackwell was clear that she wanted you to prioritize your own happiness, perhaps for the first time in your adult life." I left his office in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities. I could retire immediately. I could travel. I could take art classes, buy quality supplies, maybe even convert one of the rooms in the beach house to a proper studio. I could do all the things I'd set aside for decades. But first, I needed to tell Thomas. I called him that evening, asking if I could come over to discuss something important. His hesitation was palpable. "Is everything okay? We're actually heading out to dinner with Vanessa's parents." "It's important, Thomas. I wouldn't ask otherwise. 30 minutes later, I sat in their living room, the living room I'd helped pay for, surrounded by Vanessa's carefully curated decor. Not a single item reflected my taste or contribution, despite the fact that I'd given them the money that made this home possible. "Mom, what's going on?" Thomas asked, checking his watch. Vanessa stood near the kitchen, arms crossed, clearly annoyed by the delay to their dinner plans. "Eleanor Blackwell died last week," I began. "Yes, we know." "We were at the funeral," Vanessa said impatiently. I took a deep breath. "She left me her estate, all of it." Thomas blinked rapidly. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I'm financially secure now. I'll be retiring from nursing. She left me her beach house in Seacliff Investments and a trust fund." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Vanessa stepped forward, her expression suddenly warm. "Nancy, that's wonderful news. We're so happy for you." She turned to Thomas. "Isn't that amazing, honey?" Thomas nodded slowly, still processing. "Yeah, wow. I didn't realize you and Dr. Blackwell were that close. We worked together for 20 years, I reminded him gently. She became family to me." "A beach house in Seacliff?" Vanessa was already calculating. I could see it in her eyes. "Those properties are worth millions. The kids would love spending summers there." I smiled politely but didn't respond to her hint. "There's something else," I continued. "The lawyer discovered that when I gave you the down payment for this house, it should have been documented as a partial ownership. Legally, I own 30% of this property." The color drained from Thomas's face. "Mom, that was a gift. You never said anything about ownership." "I didn't know," I replied honestly. "Eleanor had her lawyer look into it to protect me." Vanessa's warmth evaporated instantly. "That's absurd. We've been making the mortgage payments for years. You can't just claim ownership now." "I'm not claiming anything, Vanessa. I'm simply telling you what the lawyer discovered. Nothing has to change with your living situation." But everything had already changed. I could feel it in the tension that filled the room, see it in the way Vanessa's eyes darted around her. Precious house, as if I might start marking my territory. "I should go," I said, rising. "You have dinner plans." Thomas walked me to the door, his expression troubled. "Mom, we'll figure this out. I know we've never repaid that money, but we've been planning to once Vanessa's business stabilizes." I patted his cheek, the same gesture I'd used to comfort him since he was small. "We'll talk more later. Enjoy your dinner." As I drove back to my apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Vanessa's upset. Maybe give us some space for a few days while we process this." Space turned into silence. Days turned into weeks. When I did see the children, it was always at carefully orchestrated public places, never at their home, never at mine. Vanessa was unfailingly polite but distant. Thomas seemed caught in the middle, his text messages less frequent, his calls brief. I spent that time exploring my new life. I moved into Eleanor's, now my beach house, a stunning modern structure with glass walls facing the ocean. I enrolled in art classes at the community center. I reconnected with nursing friends I'd been too busy to see for years. I started sleeping 8 hours a night for the first time in decades, and discovered the simple pleasure of watching the sunrise with no place urgent to be. As November turned to December, the holiday displays appeared around town. I bought gifts for Sophie and Jacob, hoping I'd have the chance to give them in person. But when I texted Thomas about Christmas plans, his response shattered that hope. "Mom, we think it's best if you skip Christmas this year. Vanessa's organizing something special for her parents, and she's stressed about having too many people. Maybe we can do lunch in January instead." I read the message multiple times, each reading more painful than the last. Excluded from Christmas with my only family. Dismissed as too many people, when surely he meant one too many person, me. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I drove to the beach, walked along the winter shoreline, and let the wind carry away my tears. By the time I returned home, I'd made a decision. If I truly owned 30% of their house, perhaps it was time they understood what that meant. The next morning, I called Martin Goldstein. The morning after I received that devastating text, I sat in Martin Goldstein's office, clutching a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The panoramic windows behind his desk framed Ashford Bay's harbor, where boats adorned with holiday lights bobbed gently despite the December chill. "Are you certain you want to pursue this?" Martin asked, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the winter light. "There are less confrontational approaches we could take." I set the teacup down with a quiet resolve that surprised even me. "I've spent my entire adult life avoiding confrontation, Martin. Look where that's gotten me." He nodded, understanding the weight behind my words. "In that case, I'll draft the formal ownership notification immediately. They'll receive it within 3 business days. I'd like to request something specific," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I want it delivered on December 23rd. Martin raised an eyebrow but didn't question my timing. "Consider it done." As I left his office, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying seemed to lift from my shoulders. For decades, I'd been the accommodating one, the one who bent and molded herself to fit everyone else's needs. Not anymore. Back at the beach house, I wandered from room to room, still adjusting to its spaciousness after years in my cramped apartment. Eleanor's tastes had been surprisingly similar to mine. Earth tones, natural materials, and walls adorned with local artists' work. She'd even had a dedicated art studio overlooking the water, its north-facing windows providing the perfect light for painting. I'd barely touched her supplies since moving in, feeling almost sacrilegious using the expensive brushes and canvases she'd left behind. But today felt different. Today, I removed the dust cover from her easel and selected a blank canvas. For hours, I lost myself in broad strokes of blue and gray, capturing the winter sea outside my window. As the afternoon light faded, I stepped back to examine what I'd created. Not a masterpiece by any standard, but something honest. Something mine. My phone chimed with a text from Ruth Caldwell, my neighbor at the beach house, inviting me to join the community's holiday decoration committee. I smiled, remembering how Eleanor had mentioned Ruth's legendary enthusiasm for Christmas lights. Perhaps this year, instead of decorating Thomas's house while Vanessa critiqued my efforts, I could channel my energy into something new. "I'd love to," I texted back. "When's the first meeting?" The next morning, I found myself in Ruth's kitchen with 5 other neighbors, planning the annual Seacliff holiday light display. Ruth, a vivacious 70-year-old with a crown of silver curls, handed me a steaming mug of peppermint coffee. "Eleanor never participated," she confided. "Always said she was too busy saving lives to string lights. We're delighted to have you, Nancy." As we discussed light patterns and power requirements, I felt a spark of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. These people knew nothing about me except that I now occupied Eleanor's house. They had no preconceived notions, no expectations based on decades of history. To them, I wasn't Thomas's mother or Dr. Blackwell's nurse. I was simply Nancy, the new neighbor with ideas about using blue lights to simulate ocean waves. "You mentioned you paint," Ruth said as the meeting wrapped up. "Several of us have an informal art group that meets Thursdays at the community center. You should join us." "I'm hardly professional," I demurred, the old habit of downplaying my interests surfacing automatically. Ruth waved away my protest. "Neither are we, that's the point. We drink wine, make messes, and occasionally create something worth hanging. No pressure, just fun." Fun. When was the last time I'd done something purely for enjoyment? Between work, Thomas's needs, and helping with my grandchildren, leisure had become a foreign concept. "I'll be there," I promised. The days leading up to Christmas took on a new rhythm. Mornings spent painting in Eleanor's studio, afternoons helping with the community light display, or shopping for gifts I wasn't sure I'd have the chance to give. Evenings exploring the beach house's extensive library, or chatting with Ruth over tea. I hadn't heard from Thomas since his text about Christmas, though I'd sent several messages to the grandchildren through his phone. One evening, while sorting through Eleanor's medical journals to donate to the hospital library, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Grandma?" a small voice whispered. My heart leaped. "Sophie? Is that you, sweetheart?" "Yes," she confirmed, still whispering. "I'm using Daddy's old phone that he lets me play games on. I'm hiding in my closet." "Why are you hiding, honey?" "Because Mom said we're not supposed to talk to you until after Christmas. She said you're causing problems about the house, and that's why you can't come for Christmas." I closed my eyes, willing myself to remain calm for Sophie's sake. "I miss you and Jacob very much." "We miss you too. Jacob cried when Daddy said you weren't coming. Mom said you're busy with your new rich life and new rich friends." Her voice wavered. "Are you too busy for us now?" "Never," I said firmly. "I will never be too busy for you and Jacob. I'll always be your grandmother who loves you more than anything." "Then why aren't you coming for Christmas?" The pain in her voice cut through me like glass. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that are complicated," I explained carefully. "But those disagreements have nothing to do with how much I love you. Mom says Grandma Patricia and Grandpa Howard are our real grandparents because they've been married forever and they're a proper family. She says you're just Dad's mom, not a complete grandparent." The casual cruelty of Vanessa's words, filtered through a child's innocent repetition, stole my breath momentarily. I'd known she harbored these feelings, but to express them to the children was beyond hurtful. "Sophie, families come in all different shapes," I said gently. "Some have grandparents who are married, some have grandparents who aren't. What matters is love, not whether someone is complete or proper." A rustling sound came through the phone, followed by Sophie's panicked whisper. "I have to go. Mom's calling for me." "Sophie, wait." But the line had already gone dead. I sat motionless in Eleanor's office, the medical journals forgotten in my lap. The house suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. For the first time since moving in, I questioned whether the comfort of this new life was worth the distance it had created between me and the grandchildren I adored. But then I remembered Sophie's words. Mom said you're causing problems about the house. Not that I was busy, not that I had declined their invitation, but that I was being deliberately troublesome. Vanessa was using me as the villain in her narrative, turning my absence from Christmas into my choice rather than her edict. With renewed determination, I returned to Martin's legal strategy. If Vanessa wanted a villain, I'd give her one. But on my terms, not hers. The next day, I received confirmation that the ownership notification would be delivered on December 23rd as requested. I also received an unexpected invitation from Ruth to attend the Seacliff Christmas Eve gathering, community tradition where neighbors shared food, music, and companionship. Eleanor always declined, Ruth explained as we hung lights along my porch railing. Said Christmas Eve was for families, but you're part of our community now, if you'd like to be. I hesitated, the reflex to keep my holiday calendar open for Thomas still strong despite everything. Can I let you know? I'm not sure of my plans yet. Ruth squeezed my shoulder gently. The invitation stands, whatever you decide. December 23rd arrived with a winter storm that matched my turbulent emotions. Rain lashed against the beach house windows as I paced from room to room, checking my phone obsessively. By afternoon, there was still no word from Thomas, though Martin had confirmed the delivery of the ownership documents that morning. I was beginning to think my strategy had failed when my phone finally lit up with Thomas's number. "What the hell, Mom?" he demanded without preamble. "You're suing us for the house?" Right before Christmas? I'm not suing you, I clarified, calmly. I'm simply formalizing my ownership stake in a property I helped purchase, a stake that should have been documented years ago. This feels like retaliation because we didn't invite you for Christmas, he accused. Vanessa is absolutely livid. Is that why you think I'm doing this? Because of a Christmas invitation? I asked, genuine surprise in my voice. Why else would you drop this bomb 2 days before Christmas? Vanessa's parents are already here. She's been cooking for days. And now she's in tears because you're threatening to take our home away. I took a deep breath, fighting the lifelong instinct to apologize, to smooth things over. I'm not threatening to take anything away. I'm establishing what's legally mine. And for the record, Thomas, I didn't drop a bomb. I informed you of this situation weeks ago in your living room. You and Vanessa chose to ignore it. So, this is punishment for not taking you seriously? He shot back. No, this is me finally taking myself seriously. My voice was steady, resolved. I gave you $50,000 for that house, money that represented decades of sacrifice, of putting your needs before my own, money I could have used for retirement, for health care, for pursuing my own dreams. We always intended to pay you back, he protested weakly. Did you? In 7 years, have you repaid a single dollar? Have you even acknowledged that gift in your financial planning? Or did it simply become something you felt entitled to because I'm your mother? His silence was answer enough. I don't want to take your home, I continued more gently. I simply want my contribution recognized. And yes, the timing was deliberate, not to ruin your Christmas, but to ensure you couldn't continue avoiding this conversation. Vanessa doesn't want you to have any legal claim to our house, Thomas finally said. She says it complicates everything, especially estate planning for the kids. I laughed softly, without humor. That's rich, considering I'm the one who provided the funds that made this estate possible. She wants to buy you out, he countered. We can get a home equity loan, pay you back the original $50,000. The property has appreciated considerably since then, Thomas. My 30% is worth far more now. You're going to make us pay market value? Your own family? The disbelief in his voice stung, but I held firm. I'm asking for what's fair, what's legally mine. I can't believe you're doing this, he said, his voice hardening. Vanessa was right all along. Ever since you got that inheritance, you've changed. Now you're just another rich, entitled person who thinks money gives you the right to control others. The irony of his accusation wasn't lost on me, but I chose not to point it out. I haven't changed, Thomas. I've simply stopped accepting less than I deserve. I learned that from Eleanor. Well, your new attitude has cost you your family, he snapped. Vanessa doesn't want you anywhere near us or the kids until this is resolved. And honestly, I agree with her. The pain of his words was physical, a vice around my heart. You're cutting me off from Sophie and Jacob because I'm asking for legal recognition of my investment in your home? You chose money over family, he said flatly. That's on you. Before I could respond, he hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, listening to the rain pelt against the windows and fighting the familiar urge to call him back, to apologize, to fix everything. But this time, I resisted. This time I allowed myself to feel the anger beneath the hurt. For 35 years, I'd been the one to bend, to sacrifice, to accommodate. I'd worked extra shifts to pay for Thomas's soccer camps and college applications. I'd emptied my savings to help him buy a house. I'd rearranged my life to provide free childcare for his children. And when I finally received something for myself, Eleanor's unexpected inheritance, his reaction wasn't joy for my newfound security, but entitlement to what he perceived as his share. I walked to Eleanor's studio, my studio now, and sat before the painting I'd been working on. a solitary figure on a winter beach, her back to the viewer, facing a turbulent sea. Without conscious decision, I picked up a brush and added a second figure in the distance, walking away from the first. The painting session stretched into evening. When I finally set down my brushes, the storm had passed, leaving a clear, star-filled sky. On impulse, I wrapped myself in a heavy cardigan and walked down to the beach, the sand cold and firm beneath my feet. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, rhythmic waves reflecting moonlight. I'd spent my entire adult life responding to others' needs, my patients, Thomas's, the grandchildren's, always reacting, rarely initiating, always accommodating, rarely standing firm. "I'm proud of you," Eleanor had said once, after I'd worked a double shift following a night spent at the hospital with Thomas's college-aged asthma attack. "But I worry you'll burn yourself out giving to everyone but yourself." Standing on that moonlit beach, I finally understood what she'd meant, what she'd tried to give me through her inheritance. Not just financial security, but permission to prioritize myself. The freedom to say no without guilt. The right to expect reciprocity in relationships. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Ruth checking if I was still joining the art group. "Tomorrow." "Absolutely," I replied. "Save me a glass of wine." I returned to the house with salt on my skin and clarity in my mind. Thomas's accusation echoed in my thoughts. "You chose money over family." But that wasn't what happened at all. I'd chosen self-respect over continued exploitation. I'd chosen healthy boundaries over endless sacrifice. And perhaps most importantly, I'd chosen to believe I deserved better, even if that meant spending Christmas without my son and grandchildren. The next morning, Christmas Eve, dawned bright and clear. I woke early, made coffee, and carried it to the deck overlooking the ocean. The previous day's storm had left the air unusually transparent, the horizon a crisp line between blue sea and bluer sky. My phone remained silent. No calls or texts from Thomas, no secret messages from Sophie. The silence ached, but I refused to let it consume the day. Instead, I drove into town to pick up a dish for Ruth's Christmas Eve gathering, committing fully to my new community since my old one had rejected me. Downtown Ashford Bay sparkled with holiday decorations. Families crowded the sidewalks, last-minute shopping bags in hand. Children pressed noses against toy store windows. The familiar pang of loneliness threatened as I watched grandparents, holding small mittened hands, but I pushed it aside. At the gourmet market, I selected a luxury cheese platter that would have been unthinkable on my nursing salary. As I waited to pay, a familiar voice called my name. "Nancy? Nancy Wilson?" I turned to find Howard Grant, Vanessa's father, regarding me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Howard," I acknowledged politely. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas." He shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if worried someone might see us talking. "Patricia sent me for cranberry sauce. Apparently, the canned variety Vanessa purchased is unacceptable for Christmas dinner." I smiled tightly, unsure why he was sharing this information. "I understand there's some difficulty regarding the house," he continued, lowering his voice. So that was it. Thomas and Vanessa had enlisted her parents to intervene. "There's a legal matter being resolved," I replied neutrally. Howard cleared his throat. "I spent 40 years practicing real estate law, Nancy. I know exactly what's happening. And between us—" He leaned closer. "You're entirely within your rights." I blinked in surprise. "I wouldn't have expected you to take that position." "Don't misunderstand. I'm not taking sides in a family dispute. But professionally speaking, your contribution should have been documented from the beginning. It's actually quite common in these situations." The cashier called my number, saving me from having to respond. "Nancy," Howard said as I gathered, "my purchase. For what it's worth, I think the exclusion from Christmas was Patricia and Vanessa's idea." Thomas seemed uncomfortable with the decision. A small spark of hope flared in my chest. "Thank you for telling me." He nodded curtly. "I should get that cranberry sauce before I'm sent back to search for the organic version." As I drove back to Seacliff, Howard's words replayed in my mind. Thomas had been uncomfortable with excluding me. It wasn't much, but it suggested that perhaps my son wasn't entirely lost to me, that Vanessa and Patricia's influence, while strong, wasn't absolute. Back at the beach house, I arranged the cheese platter and changed into a festive red sweater for Ruth's gathering. As I applied lipstick, something I rarely bothered with during my nursing days, my doorbell rang. I opened the door expecting Ruth or another neighbor, but instead found Martin Goldstein standing on my porch, elegant even in casual holiday attire. "Martin, is everything all right?" "Absolutely," he assured me quickly. "I was just dropping off some papers Eleanor wanted you to have." "They're not urgent, just some notes about the house maintenance, I believe." He handed me a thick envelope. "I'd have brought them after the holiday, but I was in the neighborhood visiting my daughter." "No problem at all. Would you like to come in?" "I can't stay, but thank you." His expression softened. "Are you doing all right, Nancy? The holidays can be difficult, especially after everything that's happened." The simple kindness in his question nearly undid my careful composure. "I'm managing," I replied honestly. "It hurts being separated from my grandchildren, but I'm trying to build something new here." Martin nodded understanding. "Eleanor would be pleased. She worried about you, you know. Talked about you often during our meetings." "She did?" "Oh, yes. She admired your dedication but feared you'd never learn to dedicate some of that energy to yourself." He smiled warmly. "She'd be proud to see you standing your ground." After Martin left, I opened the envelope, expecting household instructions. Instead, I found a handwritten letter from Eleanor, dated just weeks before her death. "Dear Nancy," it began in her distinctive scrawl. "If Martin is delivering this, it means I've shuffled off this mortal coil. Dramatic, I know. But I've earned the right to theatrical language after a lifetime of medical jargon. I've left you my material possessions, but there's something else I want to give you that can't be included in a legal will. Permission to disappoint others." I sat down, clutching the letter tightly. "You've spent your life trying to meet everyone's expectations, your patients, your sons, even mine. You've contorted yourself to fit whatever shape others needed. I've watched you shrink your needs, silence your voice, and exhaust yourself in service to others' happiness. Nancy, my friend, it's time to stop." Tears blurred my vision as I continued, reading. "Disappointing others isn't failure. It's the inevitable consequence of living authentically. Some people will resent you for having boundaries. They'll call you selfish for prioritizing yourself occasionally. Let them. Their disapproval means you're finally living on your own terms." The letter continued for several pages, Eleanor's voice so clear I could almost hear her speaking the words. By the time I finished reading, tears streamed freely down my face, but they weren't entirely tears of sadness. Eleanor had given me one final gift, not just financial freedom, but emotional permission to live differently, to stand up for myself without guilt, to acknowledge my own needs without shame. I carefully folded the letter and placed it in my wallet. Then I touched up my makeup, grabbed the cheese platter, and headed to Ruth's Christmas Eve gathering with a lighter heart than I'd had in months. Ruth's home overflowed with neighbors, their laughter and conversation spilling onto the deck despite the December chill. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, and a massive pine tree dominated the living room, decorated with ornaments that looked handmade and well-loved. "Nancy!" Ruth enveloped me in a warm hug. "I'm so glad you came. Let me introduce you to everyone." The next few hours passed in a blur of new names and faces, each person welcoming me without expectation or judgment. Unlike past Christmases, at Thomas and Vanessa's, where I always felt slightly peripheral, Here I was treated as an equal participant in the celebration. Mid-evening, as I chatted with Ruth's husband about his woodworking hobby, my phone buzzed with a text. I nearly ignored it, but something compelled me to check. It was from Thomas. "I know you're probably busy with your new life, but the kids are asking about you. If you want to stop by tomorrow to give them their gifts, you can come at 3. Just you, not your lawyer." The message stung with its passive aggression, but the opportunity to see Sophie and Jacob overrode my pride. "I'll be there," I texted back simply. Ruth noticed my expression as I put my phone away. "Everything all right?" I smiled, genuinely this time. "My son invited me to see my grandchildren tomorrow afternoon." "That's wonderful," she exclaimed, squeezing my hand. "I know how much you've missed them." "It's just for a short visit," I clarified. "We still have things to work through." Ruth nodded wisely. Families are complicated, but steps forward, however small, are worth celebrating. As midnight approached, the gathering shifted to Ruth's back deck overlooking the bay. Someone produced a guitar, and soon holiday songs filled the night air. Standing there among these people who had so readily welcomed me, watching the moon's reflection shimmer on the water, I felt something I hadn't experienced in longer than I could remember: contentment. Not the resigned acceptance I'd mistaken for contentment during my years of silent sacrifice, but genuine peace. The kind that comes from honoring yourself even when it's difficult. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke early to wrap the eye. Grandchildren's gifts. For Sophie, I'd chosen professional quality art supplies housed in a wooden case, similar to those in my new studio. For Jacob, a telescope and star chart, knowing his fascination with space. The morning stretched long and quiet. I painted for a while, called Ruth to thank her for the previous evening, and prepared myself mentally for the visit to Thomas and Vanessa's home. At precisely 2:55 p.m., I parked outside the craftsman house I'd helped them buy. The property looked particularly charming, draped in fresh snow, with icicle lights hanging from the eaves and a wreath on the red front door. For a moment, I sat in my car, gathering courage. Then I collected the carefully wrapped gifts and approached the house that was once my frequent destination, but now felt strangely foreign. Before I could ring the bell, the door flung open. Sophie and Jacob erupted onto the porch, their small bodies colliding with mine in enthusiastic hugs. "Grandma, you came!" Sophie cried, her arms tight around my waist. "We thought you didn't love us anymore," Jacob added, his voice muffled against my coat. "I will always love you both," I assured, them kneeling to meet their eyes despite the awkwardness of holding their presence. "No matter what happens between grown-ups, that will never change." Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression guarded. "You'd better come in. It's freezing out there." Inside, the house smelled of pine and cinnamon, of Christmas dinner, cooking and memories accumulated over years of celebrations. Vanessa was conspicuously absent, though I could hear voices in the kitchen, likely Patricia and Howard helping with meal preparations. "Can we open Grandma's presents now?" Jacob pleaded, bouncing on his toes. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead. Then you need to finish your Christmas thank you cards while Grandma and I talk." The children tore into their packages with typical enthusiasm, their delighted exclamations warming my heart. Sophie gasped when she saw the art supplies, reverently touching each brush and pencil. Jacob's eyes widened at the telescope, immediately asking if we could set it up that night. "It's too cloudy today," I explained gently. "But your dad can help you use it on the next clear night." "Or you could," Jacob suggested hopefully. "You could come back and show me. Mom says you live at the beach now. You can see lots of stars at the beach, right?" I glanced at Thomas, unsure how to respond. "We'll see, buddy," Thomas interjected. "Grandma's got her own life now. Go show your new things to Grandma Patricia while I talk to Grandma Nancy." The children reluctantly obeyed, disappearing toward the kitchen with their treasures. Thomas gestured for me to sit on the sofa, taking the armchair opposite. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Thank you for letting me see them," I finally said. He nodded stiffly. "They've been asking about you constantly. Jacob cried himself to sleep last night." Guilt twisted in my stomach, not for my actions regarding the house, but for the pain the children were experiencing in a situation they couldn't possibly understand. "I never wanted them hurt in this," I said softly. "Neither did I." Thomas sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. It was the same motion he'd made as a frustrated teenager, as a college student, struggling with finals, as a new father overwhelmed by responsibility. "Look, Mom, about the house. I don't want to take it from you," I assured him quickly. "I just want legal recognition of my investment." "I know." He looked down at his hands. "Howard explained it to us. He said we should have documented your contribution properly from the beginning. Said any real estate attorney would tell us the same thing." Surprise flickered through me. "Howard said that?" Thomas nodded. "He's been surprisingly on your side in this. Said that if we're upset about you claiming what's rightfully yours, we should examine our own entitlement." A rueful smile crossed his face. Vanessa didn't appreciate that observation from her own father. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that this situation might resolve without completely destroying my relationship with my son. "We can't buy you out right now," Thomas continued. "Not at current market value. But Howard suggested we could adjust the deed to reflect your 30% ownership, with an agreement that you won't force a sale during our lifetime. That way your investment is protected, but we don't lose our home." It was a reasonable solution, one that accomplished exactly what I'd wanted from the beginning. Acknowledgement of my contribution. "That sounds fair," I agreed. "I'll have Martin review the agreement, but in principle, yes." Thomas exhaled heavily, tension visibly leaving his shoulders. "Good. That's good." From the kitchen came the sound of children's laughter mixed with adult conversation, the normal sounds of Christmas that I'd feared I might never experience with my family again. "And what about us?" I asked carefully. "What about my relationship with Sophie and Jacob?" Thomas met my eyes directly for the first time since I'd arrived. "That's up to you, Mom. If you're willing to move forward without bringing up the past constantly, then so am I." "And Vanessa?" He sighed again. "Vanessa will come around eventually. She struggles with admitting when she's wrong, but she loves the kids, and they love you. She'll adjust." It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild, but it was a beginning. "I'd like to be part of their lives again," I said simply. "Regularly, not just on special occasions." Thomas nodded slowly. "We can work something out. Maybe they could visit you at the beach house sometimes. Sophie hasn't stopped talking about your art studio since you mentioned it on the phone. I'd like that very much." The conversation shifted to safer topics: the children's school activities, Thomas's work, my new life in Seacliff. It wasn't the warm, intimate connection we'd once shared, but it was civil, respectful. A foundation we could potentially rebuild upon. After about 30 minutes, Jacob and Sophie burst back into the room, eager to show me the toys they'd received from their other grandparents. I listened attentively to their excited explanations, savoring these moments I'd feared might be permanently lost to me. Eventually, Thomas glanced at his watch. "It's almost time for dinner, kids. Grandma Nancy needs to go now." Disappointment clouded their faces, but I smiled reassuringly. "I'll see you again soon. Maybe you can come visit me at my beach house. There's a whole art studio where Sophie can paint, and perfect spots for Jacob's telescope." "Really?" Sophie's eyes widened. "Can we, Dad? Please?" Thomas nodded. "We'll arrange something after the holidays." As I gathered my coat and purse, the kitchen door swung open, and Vanessa appeared. Her expression was carefully neutral, her posture rigid. "Merry Christmas, Nancy," she said stiffly. "Merry Christmas, Vanessa," I replied, matching her tone. We regarded each other silently, two women who had never truly understood one another despite years of forced proximity. I saw calculation in her eyes, the recognition that she couldn't simply dismiss me anymore. I had power now, both financial and legal, and she was adjusting to this new reality. I didn't need her to like me. I didn't even need her to respect me, though that would make future interactions easier. All I needed was for her to acknowledge my place in my grandchildren's lives. "The gifts were very thoughtful," she finally said. "The children love them." It wasn't an apology, it wasn't even particularly warm, but it was an olive branch of sorts, an acknowledgement that I wasn't the enemy. "I'm glad," I replied simply. Thomas walked me to the door, the children trailing. Behind us. I knelt for final hugs, breathing in their scents and committing to memory the feel of their small arms around my neck. "I love you both so much," I whispered. "Love you too, Grandma," they chorused. At the door, Thomas hesitated, then leaned in for an awkward, brief hug. "Drive safely." As I walked to my car, snow beginning to fall again in gentle flakes, I glanced back at the house. Thomas and the children stood in the doorway, watching me go. Thomas raised his hand in a small wave, which I returned before getting into my car. Driving back to Seacliff, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because everything was resolved. There were still legal documents to sign, boundaries to establish, trust to rebuild. But because for the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself without backing down, without sacrificing my own needs on the altar of family harmony. And remarkably, the world hadn't ended. My son hadn't disowned me completely. My grandchildren still loved me. And most importantly, I still respected myself. As I turned onto the coastal road leading to my new home, the ocean stretched out beside me, vast and ever-changing yet somehow constant. Like me, I realized. I had changed, evolved, grown stronger, but my core remained the same. I was still Nancy Wilson, still a mother and grandmother who loved her family fiercely. The difference was that now I loved myself with equal fierceness. Ruth had invited me to join her family for Christmas dinner, and as I approached the beach house, I decided I would accept. This Christmas might not look like any I'd celebrated before, but perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Perhaps it was simply the first of many holidays in my new life. A life where I was no longer just someone's mother, someone's nurse, someone's unpaid babysitter. A life where I was, finally and completely, myself. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a peaceful blur. I spent mornings in the studio, afternoons walking the winter beach, and evenings by the fireplace with books I'd been meaning to read for years. Ruth invited me to several neighborhood gatherings where I gradually became acquainted with the Seacliff community, artists, retirees, and professionals who had chosen coastal living over city convenience. Despite the tentative reconciliation on Christmas Day, I hadn't heard from Thomas since. I sent the children a few text messages through his phone, receiving only brief responses that seemed monitored, likely by Vanessa. I tried not to let this silence dampen my spirits. Change wouldn't happen overnight, especially with Vanessa's resistance. The important thing was that a door had opened, however slightly. On New Year's Eve, Ruth convinced me to attend the community celebration at the Seacliff Clubhouse. Eleanor never came to these things, she confided as we walked together along the beachfront path. Always said she preferred solitude to forced socialization. I'm beginning to understand why she felt that way, I admitted. The prospect of mingling with relative strangers still triggered my social anxiety, honed by years of feeling subtly inferior around Vanessa's family and friends. Ruth patted my arm. I know it's not easy putting yourself out there, especially after everything you've been through. But isolation isn't the answer, Nancy. People need community. The clubhouse glowed with light and laughter as we approached. Through the windows, I could see people chatting in elegant attire, champagne flutes in hand. I'd worn a simple black dress that had languished unworn in my closet for years, purchased for a hospital fundraiser I'd attended with Eleanor, but never had occasion to wear again. I feel like I'm playing dress-up, I confessed to Ruth as we handed our coats to the attendant. Nonsense, she replied firmly. You look lovely. Besides, most of these people have no idea who you were before. They only know who you are now, who I was now. The phrase resonated as Ruth led me into the gathering, introducing me to couples and individuals whose names blurred together. To them, I wasn't Thomas's mother or Dr. Blackwell's nurse. I was simply Nancy Wilson, the woman who'd inherited Eleanor's beach house and joined the holiday decoration committee. Nancy! Martin Goldstein appeared at my elbow, elegant in a charcoal suit. I didn't expect to see you here. Eleanor always avoided these functions like the plague. I smiled, genuinely pleased to see a familiar face. I'm trying not to follow too closely in Eleanor's footsteps. Ruth convinced me isolation isn't healthy. Wise woman you're, Ruth. Martin raised his glass in her direction. Eleanor was brilliant and generous, but she kept people at arm's length. I'd hate to see you make the same mistake. Speaking of Eleanor's generosity, I lowered my voice. Thomas and I reached a temporary agreement about the house. His father-in-law actually helped mediate. Martin's eyebrows rose. Howard Grant? That's unexpected. Apparently, he respects property law more than family politics. Or perhaps, Martin suggested thoughtfully, he recognized that you were being taken advantage of. Even difficult people occasionally recognize injustice. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an elegant older woman with silver hair swept into a chignon. Martin, darling, you promised to introduce me to this mysterious inheritor of Eleanor's empire. Martin smiled indulgently. Nancy, may I present Judith Whitmore, board president of Ashford Bay Arts Foundation. Judith, this is Nancy Wilson. Enchanted, Judith extended perfectly manicured fingers. Eleanor spoke of you often, though she never mentioned you were an artist. I blinked in surprise. I'm not. Not really. I just dabble. That's not what Ruth tells me, Judith countered. She says you have genuine talent. We're always looking for new perspectives in our community exhibition program. Before I could protest further, Ruth materialized at my side. Don't let her modest act fool you, Judith. I've seen her work. She captures light in a way that reminds me of early Hopper. Heat rose to my cheeks. Ruth, please. I've never even shown my paintings to anyone. Which is precisely why you should, Judith declared. Our spring exhibition features emerging local artists. Nothing commercial, purely for community enrichment. Say you'll consider it? The old Nancy would have declined immediately, certain of rejection, afraid of judgment. But standing there, in Eleanor's dress, in Eleanor's world, I found myself nodding. I'll consider it. Judith beamed triumphantly. Wonderful. Come by the foundation next week. We'll have coffee and discuss details. As midnight approached, guests gathered on the clubhouse terrace overlooking the bay. Servers distributed champagne for the traditional toast, and I found myself standing between Ruth and Martin as the countdown began. 10, 9, 8. I thought of Thomas and the grandchildren, wondering how they were celebrating. Were they at Patricia and Howard's lavish home? Had they already put the children to bed? 7, 6, 5. I remembered previous New Year's Eves, working night shifts at the hospital, babysitting so Thomas and Vanessa could attend parties, falling asleep alone in my apartment with the television murmuring the countdown in the background. 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! Cheers erupted around me. Ruth hugged me tightly, and Martin surprised me with a chaste kiss on the cheek. Champagne glasses clinked, and the sky above the bay exploded with fireworks, brilliant bursts of color reflecting on the dark water. In that moment, surrounded by people who knew nothing of my past struggles but accepted my present self without question, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not the desperate hope that had sustained me through difficult years. Hope that eventually, Thomas would become financially secure. Hope that Vanessa would finally accept me. Hope that sacrifices would someday be acknowledged and repaid. This was different. This was hope for myself, for a future shaped by my own choices rather than others' needs. "Happy New Year," Martin said softly beside me. "Happy New Year," I echoed, and for the first time in decades I truly believed it. Might be. The following week brought unexpected developments. First, Martin called to inform me that Thomas had officially signed the agreement recognizing my 30% ownership of the house. The document included provisions protecting my investment while assuring they couldn't be forced to sell during their lifetime. It was precisely what I'd wanted, acknowledgement without displacement. "He made one request," Martin added cautiously. "That communication about the property go through me rather than direct conversation. I believe he's trying to minimize conflict with Vanessa." I sighed, unsurprised but disappointed. "If that's what he needs, I can respect it." "For what it's worth," Martin said kindly, "these situations often improve with time. Once Vanessa realizes you're not trying to take their home away, tensions may ease." I wasn't so sure, but I appreciated his optimism. The second development arrived via text from Thomas. "Kids have asked about visiting your beach house. Would Saturday afternoon work?" My heart leaped. "Absolutely," I replied immediately. "What time? Should I prepare lunch?" His response came hours later. "I'll drop them at 1 and pick up at 4. They'll eat before coming." No mention of him staying, no acceptance of my lunch offer. Still, it was progress. The children would see my new home, spend time with me away from Vanessa's watchful eye. I spent the next 3 days preparing, cleaning the already immaculate house, setting up art supplies for Sophie, and positioning Jacob's telescope for optimal viewing from the deck. Saturday dawned clear and unexpectedly warm for January. I woke early, too excited to sleep, and found myself rearranging furniture, second-guessing my plans. Would Sophie like the art studio? Would Jacob be disappointed if clouds obscured the stars later? What if they found my home boring compared to the activities Vanessa surely organized? At precisely 1 p.m., a car pulled into my driveway. Thomas emerged first, opening the back doors for the children. They bounded up my front steps, while Thomas approached more slowly, carrying their backpacks. "Grandma!" Sophie threw herself into my arms. "Your house is right on the beach. Can we go swimming?" I laughed, hugging her tightly. "It's January, sweetheart. Much too cold for swimming. But we can walk on the beach later if you'd like." Jacob tugged at my sleeve. "Did you set up my telescope? Dad said you might have a good spot for stargazing." "The best spot," I confirmed, drawing him into my embrace. "The deck has a perfect view of the night sky. We'll check it before you leave so your dad can help you use it tonight if it's clear." Thomas reached the door, awkwardly handing me the children's bags. "They've had lunch, but they might get hungry later. There are snacks in Sophie's backpack." "I've prepared some things too," I assured him. "Chocolate chip cookies, their favorite." He nodded stiffly. "I'll be back at 4. Call if there are any problems." "There won't be," I said confidently. "We're going to have a wonderful time." Thomas hesitated, glancing past me into the house. For a moment, I thought he might ask to come in, to see where I lived now. Instead, he simply said, "Nice place," before turning back toward his car. I refused to let his coolness dampen my spirits. "Come on, you two. Let me show you around." The children's reactions to the beach house delighted me. Sophie gasped at the wall of windows facing the ocean. Jacob marveled at the spiral staircase leading to the second floor. They raced from room to room, exploring with the boundless energy of youth, while I followed behind, seeing my new home through their fresh perspective. "Is this your bedroom, Grandma?" Sophie asked, peeking into the master suite. "It is," I confirmed. "Do you like it?" She nodded solemnly. "It's prettier than your old apartment. And bigger." "Much bigger," I agreed, remembering how cramped they'd always found my previous home. "I have a special room to show you both. Come with me." I led them to Eleanor's studio, my studio now, where sunlight poured through north-facing windows onto easels, canvases, and organized shelves of supplies. Sophie's mouth formed a perfect O of astonishment. "This is where you paint?" she whispered reverently. "It is. And today, if you'd like, you can paint here too." Her eyes widened. "Really? With real artist paints?" "Real artist paints," I confirmed, showing her where I'd set up a smaller easel beside mine, with student-grade acrylics that were safer than my oils, but still far superior to children's craft paints. Jacob, less interested in art, had wandered to the windows. "Can we go on the beach now? I want to collect shells for my science project." "Of course. We'll paint, go beachcombing, have cookies, and check out your telescope spot." "How does that sound?" "Perfect," they chorused, and just like that, my anxiety melted away. These were my grandchildren, whom I'd cared for since infancy. We didn't need elaborate entertainment or structured activities. Being together was enough. The afternoon unfolded in a comfortable rhythm. Sophie and I painted side by side, her small brow furrowed in concentration as she attempted a seascape. Jacob eventually joined us, more interested in experimenting with color mixing than creating a specific image. Later, bundled in jackets, we combed the winter beach for shells and sea glass, the children darting ahead and rushing back to show me their treasures. "Can we come back when it's summer?" Jacob asked as we warmed up with hot chocolate afterward. "Dad says people swim here when it's warm." "I hope you'll visit often," I replied carefully, not wanting to promise what I couldn't control. The water is beautiful in summer, and there are tide pools to explore further down the beach. "Mom says rich people are different," Sophie commented abruptly, stirring her cocoa. "She says they forget where they came from and think they're better than everyone else." "Are you rich now, Grandma?" The question caught me off guard. "I have more money than before," I answered truthfully. "But I'm still the same person. I still love the same people." She considered this thoughtfully. "Mom said you didn't want to come for Christmas because you were too busy with your new rich friends." Anger flared briefly, at Vanessa's manipulation, at the way she used my absence to portray me as shallow and materialistic. But looking at Sophie's earnest face, I knew this wasn't the time for accusations or corrections. "I wanted very much to be with you for Christmas," I said gently. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that make celebrations complicated, but it had nothing to do with not wanting to see you or being too busy." I told Mom that didn't sound like you, Jacob chimed in loyally. "You never miss Christmas. Even that time I had chickenpox and no one else would come near me. You stayed and watched Christmas movies with me all day." Tears pricked my eyes at the memory. "That's right. And nothing's changed about how much I love you both." Sophie, always perceptive, caught the wobble in my voice. "Don't be sad, Grandma. We're here now, and we can visit lots, right?" "I hope so, sweetheart." She leaned against me, small and warm. "I like your new house. It's peaceful. Our house is always noisy because Mom and Dad argue a lot." My heart sank. "Do they argue about me?" Jacob nodded matter-of-factly. "Mom gets really angry when your name comes up. Dad tries to talk about you sometimes, like when we asked to visit today, but Mom says he's being manipulated." Out of the mouths of babes. I chose my next words carefully. Sometimes when grown-ups are upset, they say things they don't really mean. Your mom and I have had some disagreements, but I'm sure we both want what's best for you and for your dad. Mom says you're trying to take our house away, Sophie said quietly. Is that true? No, I answered firmly. That's not true at all. I helped your parents buy that house a long time ago, and recently some legal papers needed to be fixed to reflect that. But I never wanted to take your home away. Jacob looked relieved. That's what Dad said. He told Mom she was being melodramatic. I suppressed a smile at Thomas using one of my own frequent phrases from his childhood. Perhaps more of my influence remained than I'd realized. The afternoon passed too quickly. Before I knew it, 3:45 approached, and we needed to check Jacob's telescope positioning before Thomas arrived. We carried it to the deck, where I showed him the best angle for nighttime viewing. The light pollution is much lower here than in your neighborhood, I explained. You'll see many more stars from this spot. Can I bring it back next time? Maybe stay overnight so we can stargaze for real? Hope surged within me. I'd love that. We'd need to ask your parents, of course. At precisely 4 p.m., Thomas's car appeared in the driveway. The children gathered their belongings reluctantly, Sophie carefully wrapping her still damp painting, for transport. Do we have to go already? Jacob protested. We just got here. We made an agreement with your dad, I reminded him gently. But hopefully you can visit again soon. Thomas approached the door with the same stiffness he'd shown earlier. Did everything go all right? We had a wonderful time, I assured him. Sophie painted a beautiful seascape, and Jacob found some excellent specimens for his science project. Can we come back next weekend? Sophie asked, tugging at her father's sleeve. Please, Dad? Grandma has real artist paints, and she said, we might see seals from her deck if we're lucky. Thomas glanced at me uncertainly. We'd have to check our schedule. Mom might have plans. I'm always available for you, I said simply. Any time. He nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. We'll see. As they prepared to leave, Sophie suddenly threw her arms around my waist. I love you, Grandma. Thanks for the special day. Jacob joined the hug from the other side. Yeah, thanks, Grandma. Your house is awesome. Emotion thickened my throat as I embraced them both. I love you too, so much. Thomas ushered them toward the car, but paused on the step. Mom, he began. Awkwardly, the house paperwork came through. Thank you for being reasonable about the terms. It wasn't much, but it was acknowledgement. I only wanted what was fair, Thomas. For all of us. He nodded once, then followed the children to the car. I watched from the doorway as they pulled away, Sophie and Jacob waving frantically from the back seat until they disappeared around the bend. Returning inside, I noticed the small evidences of their visit. Cocoa mugs on the counter, a forgotten shell on the coffee table, Sophie's paintbrush still soaking in water. Instead of immediately tidying up, I sat in Eleanor's favorite chair, my favorite chair now, and allowed myself to feel the complex emotions swirling within me. Pride in standing my ground, joy in reconnecting with my grandchildren. Sadness at the distance that remained between Thomas and me. Anger at Vanessa's manipulative narrative. Hope that, with time and patience, healing might be possible. My phone chimed with a text, not from Thomas as I'd half expected, but from Judith Whitmore. Coffee tomorrow to discuss the exhibition? 11 a.m. at my office? I smiled, typing back my acceptance. Life was moving forward in unexpected ways, opening doors I'd never imagined exploring. The path with Thomas and his family remained complicated, but no longer consumed my entire emotional landscape. I had other relationships now, other purposes, other possibilities. That evening, I started a new painting. 3 figures walking along a winter beach, 2 small, 1 tall, their footprints trailing behind them in wet sand soon to be washed, away by the incoming tide. Impermanent impressions, yet profoundly real in the moment of their creation. Like memories, I thought. Like relationships, ever-changing, sometimes erased, but capable of being formed anew with each tide. The following weeks established a pattern. The children visited every Saturday afternoon, always dropped off and picked up by Thomas, who remained politely distant, but gradually thawed with each exchange. Vanessa never accompanied them, her absence a silent statement I chose not to challenge, for now. These visits became sacred time, uninterrupted hours when I could simply be their grandmother again, without Vanessa's critical gaze or Patricia's competitive grandmothering. Sophie progressed rapidly with painting, showing genuine artistic talent. Jacob and I developed a shared interest in coastal ecology, collecting specimens and identifying local marine life. In between their visits, I cultivated my new life. The coffee meeting with Judith evolved into regular involvement with the Ashford Bay Arts Foundation. To my astonishment, 2 of my paintings were selected for the spring exhibition. Ruth and her art group provided technical feedback and moral support as I nervously prepared my work for public viewing. Martin Goldstein, handling the legal aftermath of Eleanor's estate, became an unexpected friend. Our professional meetings gradually extended into lunches discussing books, films, and local politics. He was intelligent, kind, and refreshingly straightforward, qualities I'd learned to value after years navigating Vanessa's passive-aggressive communication style. One Saturday in late February, Thomas deviated from the established routine. Instead of saying a quick goodbye after dropping off the children, he hesitated at the door. "Mom, could we talk for a minute? Alone?" Heart racing, I directed the children to the art studio before joining Thomas on the deck overlooking the ocean. We stood side by side at the railing, watching waves crash against the winter shore. "The kids love coming here," he finally said. "It's all they talk about all week." "I love having them," I replied simply. He turned to face me, his expression troubled. "Vanessa and I have been arguing about these visits. She thinks you're trying to buy their affection, showing off your rich lifestyle to make us look bad." I fought back immediate defensiveness. "That's never been my intention." "I know that," he sighed heavily. "But Vanessa feels threatened. She always has, where you're concerned." This surprised me. Threatened? By me? Why would she feel threatened by a middle-aged nurse with no college education and no family connections? Thomas leaned against the railing, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Because the kids adore you. Because I valued your opinion. Because you represent this unconditional love that she doesn't know how to compete with." His use of past tense, valued, stung, but I focused on the unexpected revelation. "I never saw it as competition." "I know. That probably made it worse, actually." He smiled, ruefully. "Vanessa comes from a family where everything is transactional. Love, approval, support. It all has to be earned, and it can be withdrawn at any moment. Your devotion to me, to the kids. She doesn't understand it because she's never experienced anything like it." For the first time, I felt a flicker of compassion for Vanessa. How exhausting to view love as something that required constant negotiation and proof. "I never meant to make things difficult between you," I said softly. "You didn't." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, just as he had as a frustrated teenager. "Look, the real reason I wanted to talk is Vanessa's parents are taking the kids for spring break. 2 weeks in Florida. They've invited Vanessa and me to join for the second week." "That sounds wonderful," I said, though my heart sank at the thought of missing 2 Saturday visits. "The thing is," he continued, not meeting my eyes, "we can't afford for both of us to go. Someone needs to stay and work." I was thinking, would you want Sophie and Jacob to stay with you for that first week, instead of going to Florida for the entire 2 weeks? Joy burst like sunlight through clouds. "Of course! I'd love that." "But Vanessa is okay with this? Thomas grimaced. She's not thrilled, but it makes financial sense. And honestly, after our recent arguments, I think she recognizes she's been unreasonable about you. What changed her mind? He hesitated. Howard, actually. He pointed out that she was doing to you exactly what she resents her mother doing to me, judging someone's worth based on financial status and social position. Said it made her look petty and hypocritical. I raised my eyebrows, newfound respect for Howard Blooming. That was surprisingly insightful of him. He's not all bad, Thomas admitted. Just overly influenced by Patricia, like I've been by Vanessa. The parallel wasn't lost on me, but I chose not to comment. Instead, I focused on the practical details. When would the children come? What should I plan for them? As Thomas outlined the arrangements, I felt a quiet sense of victory, not over Vanessa, but over the fear and resentment that had threatened to permanently separate me from my grandchildren. This wasn't full reconciliation, but it was significant progress. Thank you, I said when he finished. Not just for trusting me with Sophie and Jacob, but for talking to me openly today. I've missed that. Something softened in his expression. I've missed it too. Before he could say more, the children burst onto the deck, eager to show us rocks they'd found in the studio, samples Eleanor had collected from beaches around the world. Dad, look! Jacob thrust a glittering piece of fool's gold toward Thomas. Grandma says this is from California. And this one's from Greece, Sophie added, presenting a smooth white stone with blue streaks. From a place called Santorini. Grandma says maybe we could go there someday and collect our own. Thomas glanced at me with amusement. Planning international travel now, Mom? I shrugged, smiling. Dreams are free. And I happen to have a friend who owns a timeshare in Santorini. Judith from the Art Foundation, I explained. She's been everywhere and knows everyone. She offered her place to me anytime I want to visit. Thomas shook his head, but his expression remained light. You've developed quite the social circle. I've been fortunate, I acknowledged. But no one could ever replace family. His smile faded slightly, something unreadable passing across his face. But before he could respond, Sophie tugged at his sleeve, redirecting his attention to more geological treasures. As I watched Thomas with the children, his patience, his genuine interest in their discoveries, I felt a surge of pride. Whatever our current difficulties, he had grown into a good father, a good man. And despite Vanessa's attempts to minimize my influence, I could see myself in his gentle handling of Sophie's enthusiasm, in his careful acknowledgement of Jacob's more technical questions. When Thomas eventually left to run errands before picking them up later, the children and I returned to our regular Saturday activities, baking cookies, walking the beach, working on Sophie's latest painting. But beneath the familiar routine, excitement bubbled about their upcoming extended stay. We can sleep in the guest room with the ocean view, Jacob confirmed for the third time. And stay up late looking at stars? Absolutely, I promised. We'll make a whole list of special activities for our week together. Sophie, arranging shells we'd collected in a pattern on the coffee table, looked up thoughtfully. Mom said, we should be careful not to break anything expensive while we're here. I frowned slightly. You don't need to worry about that. This is your home too when you visit. Eleanor, the lady who left me this house, believed beautiful things should be used and enjoyed, not just protected and admired from a distance. Was she nice? Jacob asked. The doctor lady who gave you all this stuff? Very nice, I assured him. And very wise. She taught me a lot about standing up for myself and not letting others determine my value. Sophie nodded solemnly. Like how Mom used to make you feel bad about your apartment and your clothes and stuff. My breath caught. Had they noticed that? Had they absorbed Vanessa's subtle condescension over the years? Your mom and I see some things differently, I said carefully. But we both love you very much. I know, Sophie said simply. But she made you sad sometimes. I could tell. You're not sad anymore, are you, Grandma? I gathered her into a hug, heart full. No, sweetheart, I'm not sad anymore. When 4 o'clock arrived and Thomas returned, the children extracted promises about our upcoming week together before reluctantly departing. I stood in the doorway watching them leave, as had become my ritual, waving until the car disappeared from view. Back inside, I moved through the house tidying up, preserving small traces of their presence. A drawing Jacob had left on the refrigerator, a hair ribbon Sophie had forgotten on the bathroom counter. Physical reminders that they existed, that they had been here, that they would return. As evening settled over the bay, I poured a glass of wine and returned to the deck. The February air bit with lingering winter chill, but I wrapped myself in one of Eleanor's cashmere throws and settled into a lounge chair, watching stars emerge above the darkening water. My phone chimed with a text from Ruth. Art group tomorrow? Judith wants to discuss your exhibition pieces. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, smiling. Another text arrived, this one from Thomas. Kids can't stop talking about staying with you. Thanks for making them so happy. Warmth spread through me. Not entirely from the wine. They make me happy too, I wrote back. Always have. Setting down my phone, I gazed up at the emerging constellations, the same stars Jacob would study through his telescope tonight. The same stars Eleanor had contemplated from this very spot. The same stars that had witnessed my journey from struggling single mother to overworked nurse to unappreciated grandmother to this, a woman with resources, with choices. A woman who could plan trips to Santorini if she wished. A woman who could have her grandchildren stay for a week in her oceanfront home. A woman who would soon exhibit paintings in a community art show. A woman who had finally learned that love didn't require self-erasure. That generosity shouldn't demand invisibility. That worthiness wasn't determined by others' approval. On the horizon, a light appeared, a ship making its way along the coast, steady and purposeful in the gathering darkness. I raised my glass, in silent toast, to Eleanor, to myself, to the journey still unfolding. The wind picked up, carrying the promise of spring beneath winter's final breaths. Change was coming, in the season, in my relationship with Thomas, in my own unfolding identity. For the first time in decades, I welcomed it without fear, ready to meet whatever arrived with the next tide. March arrived with unpredictable moods, savage. Winds followed by days of brilliant sunshine that coaxed early crocuses from Eleanor's meticulously planned gardens. The week of the children's extended stay approached rapidly, bringing with it both excitement and anxiety. What if they grew bored? What if they became homesick? What if Vanessa changed her mind at the last minute? I channeled my nervous energy into preparation, transforming the guest bedroom into a haven for Sophie and Jacob. Nautical-themed bedding for his side, watercolor-inspired linens for hers. A small desk beneath the window with art supplies and field guides to coastal wildlife, star charts mounted on the ceiling, designed to glow after lights out. "You're nesting," Ruth observed when she stopped by with freshly baked bread. Like a grandmother bird getting ready for hatchlings. I laughed at the image. "Is it too much? I don't want to overwhelm them." Ruth surveyed the carefully arranged room. "It's perfect. They'll feel special, not smothered." She handed me the bread with a knowing smile. I added extra cinnamon. Children always love cinnamon. The day before their arrival, I received an unexpected text from Vanessa, the first direct communication since Christmas. Sophie needs daily allergy medication, dosage instructions in her bag. Jacob still has occasional nightmares about sharks. Don't let him watch nature documentaries before bed. I stared at the message, unsure how to interpret its tone. Was this Vanessa reluctantly acknowledging I could be trusted with important information? Or was she implying I wouldn't know these things about my own grandchildren? After careful consideration, I replied simply, "Thank you. I'll make sure Sophie takes her medication and will be mindful about Jacob's viewing. They'll be well cared for." Her response came quickly. "I know they will." 3 words, yet they felt monumental, an admission, however small, that she recognized my capabilities as a caregiver. I wouldn't overanalyze it, but I tucked the moment away as a potential turning point. Thomas arrived with the children early, Sunday morning. They tumbled from the car with the exuberance of jailbreak, dragging overstuffed backpacks behind them. "We're here for a whole week," Sophie announced to the entire neighborhood, spinning in circles on my front lawn. Jacob, slightly more reserved at 10, maintained his dignity for approximately 3 seconds before joining his sister's celebration dance. Thomas watched them with a mixture of amusement and uncertainty. "They've been counting down the days," he admitted, helping me carry their luggage inside. "I think they've planned every minute of the week already." "They won't overwhelm me," I assured him. "I raised you, remember? I'm familiar with childhood enthusiasm." He smiled briefly, then grew serious. "Mom, about Vanessa. You don't need to explain," I interjected, not wanting to overshadow the children's arrival with difficult conversations. "I do, actually." He set down Sophie's flowered suitcase in the entryway. "She's been processing things, realizing some truths about herself that aren't comfortable." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Howard confronted her about how she's treated you over the years, said he raised her to be more thoughtful than that." Thomas grimaced. "It didn't go well initially, but it started something. She's been meeting with someone, a therapist, working through her issues." This was unexpected news. "That's commendable," I said carefully. "Personal growth takes courage." Thomas nodded, clearly relieved by my measured response. "She's not ready to see you yet, but letting the kids stay here is a step, a big one for her." I understand. And surprisingly, I did. If Vanessa was genuinely examining her behavior and attitudes, that deserved respect, not resentment. "Dad?" Jacob called from the deck. "Are you staying for breakfast? Grandma said she's making blueberry pancakes." Thomas shook his head. "I can't, buddy. I've got to get back to help Mom finish packing for her trip." He knelt to embrace both. "Children, be good for Grandma. I'll see you Saturday." After countless reminders about medication schedules, bedtimes, and emergency contacts, Thomas finally departed. The children and I stood in the driveway waving until his car disappeared, then turned to each other with identical expressions of gleeful conspiracy. "What should we do first?" I asked. "Everything," they chorused. And so our adventure began. That first day established our routine: pancake breakfasts, morning beach explorations, art sessions in the studio, board games after dinner, and stargazing from the deck if weather permitted. The children settled into Eleanor's home, my home, with remarkable ease, claiming spaces and creating rituals as if they'd visited 100 times before. Sophie gravitated to the art studio, spending hours beside me at the easels. Her natural talent flourished with proper materials and uninterrupted time. By the 3rd day, she'd completed a series of small ocean studies that showed genuine artistic sensitivity. "Do you think I could be a real artist someday?" she asked, carefully cleaning her brushes as I taught her. "You already are a real artist," I replied. "The question is whether you want to keep being one as you grow up." She considered this seriously. "Mom says art is a hobby, not a career. She says I should focus on subjects that will help me get into a good college." The familiar echo of Vanessa's pragmatism, likely inherited from Patricia, made me sigh. Internally. At 8 years old, Sophie was already being channeled toward conventional achievement rather than authentic expression. There's a time for practical subjects, I acknowledged. But there's also value in developing creativity and personal vision. Many successful people combine both. Like who? I thought for a moment. Like Dr. Eleanor, who left me this house. She was a brilliant physician, but she also collected art, played piano, and traveled the world appreciating beautiful things. She understood that a full life needs both practicality and passion. Sophie brightened. Could I be a doctor who paints? You could be anything you set your heart and mind to, I assured her, and you have plenty of time to figure it out. While Sophie flourished in the studio, Jacob became my shadow outdoors. His scientific curiosity, previously channeled into collecting and categorizing, expanded into experimentation and inquiry. We built a simple tide pool viewer from a clear plastic container, created a wind gauge for the deck, and started a journal documenting coastal birds and their behaviors. "Grandma, why didn't you become a scientist?" he asked one morning as we examined sand dollars through his magnifying glass. "You know so much about everything." The question caught me by surprise. "I didn't have the opportunity for that kind of education," I explained. "I had to start working right after high school. Because you had Dad? Actually, your father came a bit later. But I did need to support myself from a young age." Jacob frowned thoughtfully. "So you became a nurse instead of a doctor because you couldn't go to college for a long time?" "Something like that," I acknowledged. "But nursing was a valuable career that let me help many people." "Still," he persisted with a child's blunt assessment, "if you could have gone to college first, you might have become a doctor or a scientist, right?" I smiled at his persistence. "Perhaps. But life rarely follows a straight path, Jacob. Sometimes the detours lead us to exactly where we need to be. Like how taking care of Dad led you to work with Dr. Eleanor, which led to this house and us getting to stay here?" "Exactly like that," I agreed, touched by his perception. In the evenings, after dinner and games and before bedtime reading, we often sat on the deck wrapped in blankets, watching the day's final light fade from the sky. During these quiet moments, the children sometimes asked questions they might not have voiced in their parents' presence. "Grandma," Sophie ventured on our fourth night together, "why did you and Dad fight about the house?" I chose my words carefully. It wasn't really fighting. It was about making sure everyone understood and respected each other's contributions. "But you gave them money for the house, right? That's what Dad said." "I did. A significant amount. But when people buy houses together, they should have legal papers showing who contributed what. We didn't do that properly at the time, and recently we needed to fix it." Jacob, always practical, asked, "So now you own part of our house?" "On paper, yes. But I've promised your parents they can live there as long as they want. Nothing will change for you." "Then why was Mom so upset?" Sophie pressed. I sighed, gazing out at the darkening ocean. Sometimes people feel threatened. When circumstances change, even if the change is just acknowledging what was already true. Like how Mom got mad when I said I wanted to be an artist instead of a lawyer, Sophie suggested. I smiled at her insightful comparison. "Something like that. Adults are complicated," Jacob declared with the confidence of a child who believes himself to be quite grown up at 10. "That we are," I agreed, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Now, shall we check for planets with your telescope before bedtime?" As the week progressed, I treasured these conversations, the unguarded moments when the children revealed their perceptions and processed their understanding of family dynamics. Their insights were occasionally startling, reminding me how much children absorb even when adults believe they're not listening or noticing. Midweek, Thomas called to check in. I put him on speaker so the children could enthusiastically detail their adventures. Sophie's growing art portfolio, Jacob's tide pool discoveries, our daily beach walks, and evening stargazing. It sounds like paradise, Thomas commented when they finally paused for breath. It's way better than Florida, Jacob declared loyally. Grandpa Howard just wants to golf all day, and the resort doesn't even allow shells or rocks in the rooms, because of the cleaning staff. I bit back a smile, imagining Patricia's horror at Jacob's collection of beach treasures, many of which most people would classify as interesting garbage. After the children bounded off to prepare for our afternoon art session, Thomas spoke to me privately. They sound happier than I've heard them in months, he admitted, more relaxed. Children thrive with freedom to explore their interests, I observed carefully. Sometimes structured activities and achievements can become overwhelming. The silence on his end suggested he understood my gentle critique of Vanessa's rigidly scheduled parenting approach. Vanessa's trip is going well too, he finally said. Being away from work, away from everything, seems to be giving her perspective. I'm glad, I replied sincerely. Everyone deserves space to reflect. Mom, he began, then hesitated. I've been thinking about what you said months ago, about how we took your financial support for granted. You were right. We did. The admission, so long in coming, caught me off guard. Thomas, please let me finish. I've been going through our financial records, looking at everything objectively. You didn't just help with the house down payment. You paid for Sophie's preschool when we couldn't afford it. You bought Jacob's first bedroom furniture. You covered the insurance deductible when Vanessa had her gallbladder surgery. I remained silent, touched that he'd finally recognized these contributions. We never even properly thanked you, he continued, voice thick with emotion. Let alone paid you back. You were building your lives, I said softly. That's what parents do. Help when they can. No, Mom, what you did went far beyond normal parental support. And instead of gratitude, we treated you like you were obligated to keep giving indefinitely. His words healed a wound I hadn't fully acknowledged. The pain of having my sacrifices treated as entitlements, my generosity as mere duty. Thank you for saying that, I replied simply. It means more than you know. After we hung up, I stood, motionless in Eleanor's study, my study, absorbing the significance of Thomas's acknowledgement. For years, I'd told myself I didn't need recognition or gratitude, that giving silently was the mark of true generosity. But hearing my son finally acknowledge my contributions had released something tight and painful inside me. Perhaps true generosity didn't require invisibility after all. Perhaps it was healthier for both giver and receiver when sacrifices were named, appreciated, and honored. The children and I settled into a pleasant rhythm as the week continued, mornings exploring outdoors, afternoons creating in the studio or kitchen, evenings playing games or reading together. We baked Eleanor's secret recipe chocolate cookies, painted watercolor postcards to send to Thomas, and built an elaborate sandcastle city that survived almost 3 hours before the tide reclaimed it. On Thursday morning, Ruth invited us to join the neighborhood's weekly beach cleanup. The children enthusiastically donned gloves and carried collection bags, racing each other to retrieve bits of plastic and styrofoam before the waves could carry them back to sea. Your grandchildren are delightful, Ruth commented as we supervised from a driftwood log, so engaged with everything around them. They've always been curious, I agreed proudly. But they've really blossomed this week with unstructured time to explore. Ruth nodded knowingly. Children need that freedom. My own grandchildren visit every summer. Their parents drop them off for 2 glorious weeks of what I call benign neglect. No schedules, no enrichment activities, just discovery and play and making messes that don't matter. I laughed in recognition. That's exactly what we've been doing. I was worried they might get bored without constant entertainment. Never underestimate children's capacity to entertain themselves when given space and permission, Ruth said wisely. It's when we overschedule them that they forget how. Jacob rushed over, triumphantly holding up a sand-encrusted bottle cap. Grandma, is this a real artifact? It looks super old. Ruth and I exchanged amused glances. Let's clean it up and… See? I suggested, examining his treasure with appropriate seriousness. It might be from an old sailing ship, or possibly last weekend's beach picnic. He darted away, already narrating an elaborate story about pirate treasure to his sister, who was diligently filling her collection bag with tiny bits of sea glass. You're a natural grandmother, Ruth observed. Some people try too hard, overcompensating, with expensive gifts or excessive indulgence. You found the perfect balance, engaged but not intrusive, supportive but not smothering. Her words warmed me. I've had practice. I helped raise these two from infancy while their parents worked. And yet they seem to be discovering a new side of you here, Ruth noted perceptively. The artist, the naturalist, the woman beyond just grandma. She was right. In our former dynamic, constrained by Vanessa's expectations and preferences, I'd been relegated primarily to practical support, childcare, cooking, homework help. Here in my own space, I could share my full self with Sophie and Jacob, my emerging artistic practice, my love of nature, my quiet enjoyment of beautiful things. I'm discovering that side of myself too, I admitted. For so long, I defined myself by what I gave to others: care, time, financial support. I'm learning there's more to me than just that. Ruth squeezed my hand. Eleanor would be pleased. She always said you had depths your family never recognized. The week's final days passed too quickly. Friday arrived with the bittersweet awareness that our special time together was ending. Thomas would retrieve the children Saturday morning, after which they would join Vanessa in Florida for the second week of spring break. Can't we just stay here instead? Jacob pleaded over breakfast. Florida is hot and boring. Your mother is looking forward to seeing you, I reminded him gently. She's missed you this week. Sophie looked up from her pancakes. Do you think Mom will let us come back during summer break? For another whole week? I hope so, I replied cautiously. We'll need to see how everyone feels after this visit. Dad will say yes, Jacob stated confidently. He said you're good for us. My heart warmed at this second-hand affirmation. Did he? When was this? When he was arguing with Mom about letting us come, Sophie explained matter-of-factly. He said being with you helps us be more creative and independent. I stored this information carefully, another small treasure to examine later. Well, I certainly hope we can do this again. But for now, let's make our last day special. What shall we do? They chose a final beach expedition, followed by making farewell gifts in the studio. Sophie painted a watercolor of the three of us on the beach, surprisingly sophisticated in its composition and color use. Jacob created a scientific specimen box filled with labeled shells, rocks, and dried seaweed, a reminder of our nature explorations. What about gifts for your parents? I suggested. Something to thank them for letting you stay this week? Sophie's brow furrowed in concentration. I could paint something for Dad, but Mom doesn't really like art unless it matches the furniture. I suppressed a smile at this accurate assessment of Vanessa's decorating philosophy. Perhaps something useful, then? We could bake cookies for your trip. This suggestion met with enthusiastic approval. We spent the afternoon making chocolate chip cookies for Thomas and delicate lemon shortbread for Vanessa, packaging them in decorative tins from Eleanor's pantry. As evening approached, a melancholy settled over our activities. The children grew quieter, more clingy. Sophie insisted on helping me prepare dinner, standing close beside me at the counter. Jacob abandoned his usual independence, asking me to read to him like I had when he was much younger. At bedtime, after stories and tucking in, Sophie whispered, I wish we lived here with you all the time, Grandma. The simple statement, so earnest and loving, brought tears to my eyes. I love having you here, sweetheart. But your home is with your parents, where you belong. I know, she sighed. But it's different here. You listen to us more, and you don't get upset about small things. Jacob, from his twin bed across the room, added, and you let us try stuff even if we might get a little dirty or make mistakes. Those are good things, I acknowledged. But your parents love you very much, even if they show it differently sometimes. Mom loves us her way, Sophie agreed sleepily. But I like your way too. Long after they had fallen asleep, I sat in Eleanor's chair, my chair, in the living room, watching moonlight silver the ocean. Sophie's words echoed in my mind. Mom loves us her way, but I like your way too. There was wisdom in that simple observation. Different expressions of love, different approaches to nurturing, could coexist without competition or judgment. Perhaps that was the path forward with Vanessa, not trying to change her parenting style or prove mine superior, but offering the children complementary experiences that enriched their lives. Saturday morning arrived with glorious sunshine, as if the weather itself were determined to make our parting as beautiful as possible. The children woke early, insisting on one last beach walk before breakfast. We combed the shore as sunrise painted the sky in watercolor pinks and golds, collecting a few final treasures for Jacob's specimen box. Back at the house, we prepared a farewell breakfast feast: French toast with fresh berries, crispy bacon, and hot chocolate with homemade whipped cream. The children ate with surprising appetite despite their obvious sadness about leaving. We'll FaceTime every day from Florida, Jacob promised solemnly, so you won't get lonely. And we'll draw pictures of everything we see, Sophie added, so it's like you're there too. I hugged them both, marveling at their generous hearts. I'd like that very much. All too soon, Thomas's car appeared in the driveway. The children made a final check of their rooms, gathering treasures and artwork to take home. Jacob insisted on leaving his telescope at my house, so it's ready for next time. Sophie carefully placed her paint-spattered smock in the studio cabinet, smoothing it as if making sure it would wait patiently for her return. Thomas seemed more relaxed than when he'd dropped them off, greeting me with a genuine smile and even a brief hug. They look happy and healthy, he observed, slightly tanned despite it being March. We spent most days outdoors, I explained. The weather cooperated beautifully. I hope they weren't too much trouble. Not for a moment, I assured him truthfully. We had a wonderful week. While the children loaded their belongings into the car, Thomas handed me an envelope. This is from Vanessa and me. Inside was a handwritten note from my son. Mom, we can never repay everything you've given us over the years, but we want to start acknowledging it properly. This is the first installment toward repaying the house down payment. We've set up a monthly transfer to continue until the full amount, with interest, is repaid. Thank you for your patience and generosity. Love, Thomas. Attached was a check for $2,000, not an insignificant sum for their budget. Thomas, this isn't necessary, I began, deeply touched by the gesture. It is, he interrupted firmly. You were right all along. We took advantage of your generosity without proper gratitude or acknowledgement. That stops now. His words meant more than the money itself: recognition of my sacrifice, respect for my financial boundaries, acknowledgement that generosity shouldn't be exploited. Thank you, I said simply. The children's goodbyes were tearful but sweet, filled with promises to return soon and plans for future adventures. I hugged them fiercely, memorizing the feel of their small bodies against mine, the scent of their hair, the sound of their voices. Take care of each other, I whispered, and remember you can call me anytime. Even in the middle of the night if we have bad dreams? Jacob asked. Especially then, I assured him. As their car pulled away, I remained in the driveway waving until they disappeared from view. The house felt immediately emptier, quieter, the children's energy leaving a vacuum behind. I moved through the rooms slowly, gathering abandoned socks, straightening books, returning art supplies to their proper places. In the guest bedroom, Sophie had left a small painting on her pillow, a portrait of me sitting at my easel, sunlight streaming through the studio windows. On the back, she'd written in careful cursive, "For Grandma, thank you for teaching me to be a real artist. Love, Sophie." Tears blurred my vision as I placed the painting carefully on my dresser. This week had given me more than just time with my grandchildren. It had allowed me to share parts of myself I'd kept hidden or undeveloped for years. In nurturing their interests and talents, I had finally given myself permission to nurture my own. My phone chimed with a text from Thomas. "Kids already planning their summer visit. Hope that's okay." I smiled through my tears, typing back, "Nothing would make me happier." Setting down the phone, I walked out to the deck and gazed at the ocean, vast and ever-changing, yet somehow constant. Like family relationships, I thought, sometimes turbulent, sometimes peaceful, shaped by forces beyond our control, yet ultimately finding their natural balance if given time and space. The spring exhibition at the Ashford Bay Arts Foundation would open in 2 weeks. My paintings, 3 seascapes and the portrait of figures walking on a winter beach, would hang alongside works by established local artists. Judith had already hinted that several gallery owners would attend, looking for fresh talent. Life was opening before me in unexpected ways. Through standing up for myself, I hadn't lost my family as I'd feared. Instead, I'd gained a deeper, more authentic relationship with them, one based on mutual respect rather than exploitation, on appreciation rather than entitlement. Eleanor's words from her letter returned to me. Disappointing others isn't failure. It's the inevitable consequence of living authentically. She had been right. By finally disappointing Thomas and Vanessa, refusing to be the endlessly giving, never-complaining mother and grandmother they'd come to expect, I had created space for a healthier dynamic to emerge. One where my needs mattered too. One where generosity flowed from choice rather than obligation. The afternoon stretched before me, quiet but full of possibility. I could return to my latest painting, call Ruth to arrange dinner, or simply sit with the rich memories of the past week. For the first time in decades, the choice was entirely mine. I smiled and turned toward the studio, where sunlight beckoned. Through the north-facing windows and a fresh canvas awaited. The spring exhibition at the Ashford Bay Arts Foundation transformed everything. My 4 paintings, modestly priced compared to the established artists, sold within the first hour of opening night. Judith beamed as she introduced me to collectors and gallery owners, no longer as Eleanor's friend, but as our emerging talent, Nancy Wilson. "You've captured something authentic in your work," a gallery owner from the city told me, his card pressed into my palm. "There's honesty in your brushstrokes. Call me when you have a larger collection ready." I floated through the evening in a daze, champagne bubbles matching the effervescence in my chest. Ruth stayed close, whispering encouragement when my confidence wavered. Martin arrived fashionably late, presenting me with a small bouquet of beach roses. "Eleanor would be immensely proud," he said, his voice warm with sincerity. The exhibition's success opened unexpected doors. 2 galleries requested meetings. The local community college invited me to teach a beginner's watercolor workshop. Judith suggested I consider a small solo show in the foundation's annex space by year's end. Amid this whirlwind of opportunity, I received a text that eclipsed everything else. "Mom, we'd like to invite you to Easter dinner, at our house, all of us, including Vanessa." Thomas Easter, the first family holiday since being excluded from Christmas. My hands trembled slightly as I replied, "I'd be honored. What can I bring?" His response came quickly. Just yourself. Vanessa wants to handle all the food. Those words, Vanessa wants, followed by something positive regarding my inclusion, felt monumental. I spent the intervening weeks wondering what precipitated this change, preparing myself for whatever dynamic awaited. When Easter Sunday arrived, I stood on their porch clutching a small gift bag containing hand-painted eggs I'd created for the children. Thomas opened the door before I could ring the bell, enveloping me in a proper hug, the kind we'd shared before everything fractured. "Mom," he said simply, and somehow that single word carried a wealth of reconciliation. Inside, the house smelled of rosemary and citrus. Vanessa emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron over her Easter dress, her expression carefully composed, but not unwelcoming. "Nancy," she acknowledged with a small nod. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me," I replied, matching her measured tone. The children broke the lingering tension, barreling downstairs upon hearing my voice. Their Florida tans had faded, but their excitement at seeing me remained vibrant. They pulled me into the living room, eager to show me their latest achievements: Sophie's school art prize, Jacob's science fair project. Throughout dinner, conversation remained polite, occasionally warming into genuine connection. The children provided enthusiastic buffers against awkward silences. Thomas engaged me directly, asking about my exhibition, genuinely interested in this new chapter of my life. Vanessa spoke less but watched more, her eyes tracking the easy affection between the children and me, noting Thomas's relaxed demeanor. After dessert, while Thomas helped the children hunt for remaining Easter eggs in the backyard, she finally addressed me directly. "Your painting sold?" she stated, rather than asked. "Thomas mentioned it." "They did," I confirmed. "It was unexpected." She nodded, arranging dessert plates with precise movements. "The children talk about their week with you constantly. The art studio, the beach, the stars." Her voice remained neutral, but something vulnerable flickered across her expression. "They've never been so enthusiastic about Florida. They're at an age where exploration and discovery are precious," I offered carefully. "The beach house simply provides different opportunities than a resort." Vanessa's hands stilled. "I've never been good at that, the unstructured exploration part of parenting. I prefer schedules, achievements, measurable progress." The admission surprised me with its honesty. Different approaches benefit children in different ways. They need both structure and freedom. Perhaps she met my eyes directly for what felt like the first time in years. "I'm not ready to be friends, Nancy. I don't know if I'll ever be. But the children adore you, and keeping you separated has hurt them. So we need to find a way forward that puts their needs first." It wasn't an apology, but it was an olive branch, perhaps the most significant one possible given our history. "I would welcome that," I replied simply. After a moment, she added, "Thomas tells me you're teaching now, at the community college." "Just a workshop," I clarified. "Nothing formal." Still, it's interesting how life evolves. Something like respect flickered briefly in her expression. Finding new purpose at your age. I might once have bristled at the qualification "at your age," but now I recognized it as Vanessa's awkward attempt at connection. "Life continually offers new paths if we're willing to explore them," I replied. The children burst back inside with Thomas, effectively ending our private conversation. But something had shifted, however slightly. A door had cracked open between us, not to friendship perhaps, but to mutual respect and civil coexistence. As summer approached, this new equilibrium solidified into a workable arrangement. The children spent one weekend a month at my beach house, sometimes accompanied by Thomas, occasionally even with Vanessa for brief periods. I was invited to school performances, sports events, and family celebrations. Monthly transfers continued to arrive in my account, Thomas steadily repaying the house down payment as promised. In July, 6 months after that life-changing Christmas exclusion, Thomas invited me to lunch alone, something that hadn't happened in years. "I wanted to thank you," he said once we were seated at a quiet cafe near the harbor. "For standing your ground, for not giving up on us even when we deserved it." "You're my family," I replied simply. That never changed. He smiled ruefully. "But it could have. If you'd been a different person, or if Eleanor hadn't given you the means to assert yourself." He shook his head. "We gave you every reason to walk away permanently." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But that would have punished all of us, especially the children." Thomas reached across the table, covering my hand with his. "You've transformed since last Christmas. There's a confidence, a certainty about you now." I considered this assessment. Not transformation so much as revelation. These qualities were always there, just submerged beneath everyone else's needs and expectations. "Including mine," he admitted. "I never saw you as a whole person with your own dreams and talents. You were just Mom, endlessly supportive, endlessly available." "That was partly my doing," I said gently. "I defined myself that way for so long, I almost forgot there could be more to me." "Well, I see you now," he said firmly. "The artist, the teacher, the independent woman who stands her ground. And I'm proud to be your son." Those words, so simple, so profound, healed something deep within me that I hadn't realized was still wounded. My eyes filled with unexpected tears. "That means everything," I whispered. Later, walking along the harbor, Thomas mentioned tentative holiday plans. "Vanessa suggested we might do Christmas at your beach house this year, if you're willing. The children would love it, and," he hesitated, "it would be a meaningful way to close the circle. Christmas at my house, the entire family. The symmetry of it struck me. How a painful exclusion had set in motion changes that made inclusion not just possible, but desired." "I would love that," I replied. "But are you sure Vanessa is comfortable with it?" Thomas nodded. "Her therapist has helped her recognize some patterns, how she transfers her mother's judgmental attitudes onto others, how her insecurity manifests as control. She's working through it." He smiled slightly. "She actually said your home has better energy for a family gathering." Coming from Vanessa, this was high praise indeed. That evening, alone on my deck, watching the summer sunset paint the bay in gold and crimson, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From excluded, mother to independent woman. From unacknowledged benefactor to respected elder. From invisible support to visible creator. Eleanor had given me financial freedom, but I had given myself something equally valuable. Permission to exist fully, to claim space, to expect reciprocity in relationships. My phone chimed with a text from Sophie. "Guess what, Grandma? Mom says, we're having Christmas at your house this year. Can we make those cookies with the chocolate inside? Love you." I smiled, typing back. "Absolutely. Love you too." The ocean stretched before me, constant yet ever-changing, like life itself, like family relationships, like me. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.